14th and I. Vince McMahon, we have heard for months, transitioning away from the wrestling business, which he would claim he was never a
He
part
was
of.
never in that.
He was never in the
He was in the
wrestling
show
business.
business.
But instead, he is now transitioning over, and this is his new company, which now has a name attached to it. And it's not just some random intersection. In fact, it has a historical significance. Brandon, you uncovered this. What did you find in some of these filings, and what is the significance of 14th and I?
Well, there are LLCs that he's registered, which he's registered LLCs called 14th and I, which the origin of that name is apparently an intersection in Washington, D.C., where the Capital Wrestling Corporation offices used to be, which is the predecessor company to WWE when it was under Vincent J. McMahon. Um, he's also registered trademarks, and if this was going to be a wrestling company, I mean, when we see trademarks registered for wrestling companies that are undoubtedly for wrestling related use, they do use the word wrestling in the purpose category. So, like, say, when AEW registered the AEW trademark for the first time, or when WWE registers nearly any of their trademarks, or when AEW registers nearly any of their trademarks, they do make it pretty clear that they want to use this trademark for the purposes of wrestling events or something like that. Usually, we get the word wrestling in the purpose. That's not in here for the 14th and I trademarks, which he has applied for both with spaces between the ampersands and without spaces between the ampersands. And according to those filings, this is going to be a private equity company, and it will be also related to scripted entertainment, not the wrestling business. Even under Vince, it was these filings that WWE was doing were said that they were related to wrestling. So there's no indication here that he's starting a wrestling company. There's certainly no indication that he's going to buy back WWE, as some people have theorized or heard. That does not seem to have any truth to it. I think Vince has got multiple billions of dollars in net worth, but I don't think he has nearly enough to buy back TKO, nor is there any indication that TKO or Endeavor would ever consider such a thing.
No, I don't. I don't think that one is in the cards. The only other name that we know that is linked to 14th and I is Brad Blum, who formerly an executive at WWE. He was also one of the uncovered corporate officers named in the Janelle Grant amended complaint against Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and WWE. But beyond that, we are not aware of anyone else that is necessarily associated with the company, but at least Brad Blum is. He is listed as the CEO of this company or president of this
President.
company.
He's got on his LinkedIn profile that he is the president of 14th and I. For some reassurance, his LinkedIn profile is verified, which means that he's probably shown his government ID to LinkedIn so that they can verify that this is really the Brad Blum, who's been a long time former W executive. When Vince was in and out of the company, Brad Blum was soon to follow him out and back in and then back out again. So it appears to be somebody very closely aligned with Vince McMahon in a pretty high level executive role. We know he was chief of staff. He had an EVP role, I believe. Janelle Grant describes various interactions she had with him. So he's been a long time W executive and apparently close to Vince. There might be a few other people you can find on LinkedIn. But how I confirmed this, to be clear, is this is not something that somebody told me in secret, but you can go on the Connecticut government website and search for businesses that are registered or that are registered in Connecticut. And this is a Delaware company because a lot of companies are incorporated in Delaware, but this has an office in Stamford. It's got the principal is Vincent McMahon. It's got a signature that looks like Vincent McMahon's signature on it. I reached out to Vince McMahon's representatives. They did not provide a comment, but we certainly don't have any denials here that this is Vince McMahon's company, and this is what he's going to do apparently, or is already trying to do. And this business was registered back in September, so this is not necessarily even a new company that has just come into existence. We've just only finally learned about it just now. Probably because anybody probably could have figured this out 9 months ago or something like that if they wanted.
This was just some late night scrolling and coming across 14th and
I looked up Brad Blum on LinkedIn and I said, oh, he's working for a company here. What's this?
And lo and behold,
because he was already reported. Taking credit to PW Insider for reporting that Vince was getting into some sort of new business venture and that Brad Blum would be involved. So that all connects here.
So if you were looking at this, like number one, where this does differ from some of Vince McMahon's past outside ventures that he has gotten into, of course, I would say the most high profile recent one was when he formed Alpha Entertainment and relaunched the XFL. This was announced back in 2018 and then was a one and done season as it returned. But, in this is not a Vince McMahon that has any attachment with WWE. On the flip side, Vince McMahon has more personal wealth than ever before that can certainly be, the backbone of any kind of entity with
And he's
the overall.
liquidated quite a bit of it since the merger closed in 2023.
Yes, like we know of the fact Vince McMahon has what we perceive to still be like some level of connection to Saudi Arabia and how instrumental he was in there as well. But overall of this, it is Vince McMahon, a post WWE career, as he's in the midst of multiple lawsuits, not just the Janelle Grant suit, but also the Ring Boy suit and, attached with the shareholder lawsuit that's ongoing. Is any of that preventative of Vince McMahon moving forward with this type of a company and Vince McMahon being able to do business at a level that he wants out of this company?
That's the question, right? We don't know of any projects that are moving forward here. We don't really know anything beyond the name. It exists. It's got some trademark applications. It was started in September. The trademark applications were applied for, I believe, in August. But if there are any actual media or entertainment projects or investments, we don't know. That would suggest that I'm not necessarily sure that Vince would be like involved day to day, but it certainly seems like he's going to be the one funding it, and he's liquidated, I believe, well over. He has liquidated well over $1 billion since the merger closed in September 2023. He still has plenty of W stock. He's still got about 4% of the total company, which is, depending on the day, which is another more than $1 billion that he could potentially liquidate. So, I mean, as far as we know, he doesn't have a title. I don't know how closely he's working on the company, or if it's Brad Blum that's primarily involved, and who knows.
Yeah, it's like it's one where I feel ultimately he can raise, doesn't even have to raise it. Like he has the capital behind him that can get him into a lot of various projects and businesses. And I really downplay the effect that any of these past years of allegations are going to prevent him from work. Like there might be a certain ceiling of companies that don't want to associate with Vince McMahon, but I think those are going to be the exceptions rather than the rule. It will ultimately come down to how aggressive this company is going to be and how much of a public face Vince McMahon will even be to this company. This is not something he is trying to get out in front of and attach himself to or do any kind of PR rehabilitation of his image. Like this has been, when Vince McMahon's name comes up, it is typically attached to Janelle Grant, and that is the public perception of Vince McMahon and has been for the majority of the last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, we know that probably a major factor in what led Vince to leave the company in January 2024 after Janelle Grant filed her lawsuit was that Slim Jim, more about Slim Jim later, Jim backed out as a sponsor of the Royal Rumble in 2024. Probably would have been the case if he had not resigned pretty quickly after that more sponsors would have followed, and maybe there would have been more business partner pressure. But that just gives you a sense. And now that was a year and a half ago, and maybe the heat has died down. I don't know. I mean, if you're looking at somebody who's got well over $1 billion liquidated within the last couple of years, do you turn it down to because it's Vince and because of the news around Vince, or do you say, all right, we'll accept it, and maybe it won't be that big of a deal for us, maybe it won't be that much of a deterrent to do the kind of business that we want, to make movies or whatever it might be.
That's the soundbite right there. We make
movies,
movies.
pal.